Hey, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Peach Pundit Podcast. Thanks for joining us. Jason Pye, as always, Scott Turner, Buzz Brockway.
Yo.
So, guys, before we jumped on, before I hit record, we were talking college football. College football is back.
Yay!
At last, our long national nightmare is over, except for COVID. COVID's still around, unfortunately, which actually I think is the reason we wanted to discuss this, because the collective freak out over the size of the crowds we were seeing, and still being in the middle of a pandemic with the Delta variant surging. 90. Go ahead, Scott.
And the numbers are worse apparently than last year this time.
That's right. Yeah. So, but at the same time, it's college football, and we need something to get us by. And college football is key to our happiness. There could be 93,000 people in Sanford Stadium this weekend, easily. And not to mention the thousands of people who are gonna tailgate before the game. I watched the UNC VT game last Thursday. When that stadium was packed out, they were rocking out to Enter Sandman. That was an amazing football game. Obviously, up in Charlotte this past weekend, University of Georgia beat Clemson Tigers. Georgia Tech, of course, lost in Northern Illinois. I'm not sorry, Buzz.
Okay, fine, whatever.
I mean, you guys didn't even play St. Mary's School of the Blind, and
By the way, can we time out? Okay, I looked up.
Look,
St.
NIU
Mary's
has a long history of being a Division I, a Power 5 beater. So
you need to find a fictional school, because St. Mary's School for the Blind is a real place. I'm just saying. I looked it up after last week because you keep using it. Yeah. You keep using it, and I don't want you to get canceled, Jason. So you need to find it.
Just pick somebody else on the rest of Georgia's schedule.
Charleston. You
like UAB?
Charleston Southern, UAB.
Charleston Southern,
yeah.
Kentucky,
but
Vanderbilt, Missouri.
UAB produced a quality NFL star, Roddy White.
Sure.
One
of my favorite Falcons of all time.
Yeah, no, for sure. But no, you guys were, obviously, Buzz, you were at the game Saturday night, Georgia Tech.
Yeah, I know it was Georgia Tech. We didn't have 93,000 people there like you're going to have in Athens, but just to be in a stadium with people cheering and yelling and reacting to the plays and not having this piped in fake stuff that we had to endure last year. And I'm not blaming anybody. That's just how it is, what it is. But it was so awesome to be. And I think the first thing I saw Saturday was I turned on, and one of the noon games was Michigan at home versus I can't remember even who they were playing. Those poor, but 100,000 people there in Michigan, in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I was a little shocked that Governor Whitmer allowed that to happen. But also, man, that's fantastic. It's exciting.
No, it is exciting, and Scott, I know you're also a football fan, Kennesaw State University being your school of choice.
Yeah,
but
go Owls.
Yeah. But I know, I think all three of us are sports fans. We enjoy watching baseball, football, whatever the case may be. I'm not a big basketball fan.
Yeah.
I love the rest of them. But I know there's the sports fans in us are all kind of just giddy that we're actually getting to see some live action sports with crowds there, and in the experience, the noise. Even though we're watching from TVs, we're seeing the full gamut of what it was like pre-pandemic.
Yeah, I went to Chicago, went to Wrigley Field this summer, and that was an amazing experience. It was a packed out crowd, 30,000+ people on a day game, a Thursday afternoon day game. It was an amazing experience. Just to walk the halls of places, the ghosts speak to you at Wrigley. You can almost hear like Ernie Banks saying, "Let's play two." It's amazing. It's just, or Harry Carey singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." It's, that type of experience being in person, you just can't replicate it. And it certainly is way better than having plastic cutouts of people's faces and dogs and stuff in the stands. Yeah. I'll just say one other thing, obviously I went to Kennesaw State, and I cheer on for Kennesaw State. I grew up a Florida State fan. Bobby Bowden passed away this year. The Florida State band had a wonderful tribute to Bobby Bowden, who, by all accounts, this is a classy individual. They spelled his name while they played Amazing Grace, and the fans there were electric, playing against Notre Dame. That was one of the most entertaining college football games I can remember from Florida State in the last 6-7 years since Jameis Winston left. Really?
And FSU put up a hell of a fight.
They did. And that was what was great about that, is seeing that type of heart from them, which had been absent, frankly, over the last several years.
And there was some great games and numerous great games over the weekend. And I think I heard some of the players at different schools talking about how the crowd spurred them on, helped their performance. So, but I mean, it strikes me as interesting that people are freaking out when we've had baseball all summer long. COVID is the Delta variant is raging all over the place. I don't think that baseball was the cause of that, and I don't think that college football is going to make it any worse than it already is.
Right.
It seems to me, I'm no epidemiologist, I wouldn't dare pretend, but it strikes me as common sense that adding college football to the mix of when we've had all spring and summer and now fall of baseball with packed stadiums all across the country, it's the same dynamic in my mind.
First of all, in the vast majority of these games that are being played, obviously there are a couple that were played this past weekend in domes, but these are outdoor experiences. The students, most schools, particularly public colleges, are requiring vaccinations. Not to mention the fact that many of us are vaccinated, maybe not all of us, and certainly in some states not even half of us, but many of us, if not roughly half of us, are vaccinated. So we're getting there, and I think it's I would not have a problem going and watching a college football game. Of course, I'm vaccinated. I'm going to get my booster shot when that's ready. But I, at the same time, there was one tweet I saw. I forgot who it was. It was criticizing people for being at the game. He's like, something along the line, this is a super spreader event, or it was a nightmare, or something like that. Of course, somebody found an old tweet of his where he went to an indoor basketball game. It's like, come on. If it's okay for you, it's okay for the rest of us. Like,
right.
Please step off your high horse, stop virtue signaling. You do it too. We're all ready for this to be over with. And you can't.
None of that. You were so excited about it. You tweeted about it. Here's the proof.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I mean, I realize the elites think they're governed differently from the rest of us, but we're all ready for this to be over with. It's time for life. I mean, I think at this stage, though I mentioned this today to a friend of mine, at this stage, I think we're all trying to, because right after Delta is going to come another variant, and there's already another variant that's popping up in the United States. And I think we're all kind of like realizing that this is something we might have to live with for a while.
Well, and it's up to us to manage our own risk, right? Nobody can do that for us. If you're not comfortable, don't go. That's the short answer. If you are comfortable, mitigate your risk. Do the hand washing. Stay as far away as you can, whenever possible. Wear a mask if that makes you feel better. There are things you can do to mitigate your risk, but you own that risk, right? Nobody else does. The government doesn't own it for you. Governor Kemp doesn't own it for you. The UGA Bulldogs do not own it for you. Yeah. If you can choose not to participate in these things and eliminate that risk for yourself.
Yeah. If I was 10, 20 years older, maybe I'd think differently. I'm 40. I'm not high risk. I don't have any condition. I'm not diabetic. I don't have any conditions that would be exacerbated if I got COVID. I feel comfortable going out. Of course, I wash my hands or wear a mask when I feel like it's necessary. But like you said, Scott, I mean, measure your own risk. I mean,
right.
We can't live our lives stuck inside of our houses. We can't do that.
It's forcing us to get to where guys like Dr. Jay Bhattacharya at Stanford University have said that we should be doing a long time ago, and that's learning how to live with this virus, because it is not going away. We are never going to stamp this out. So it's going to have to be. We have to learn how to live with it and learn how to function and live our lives, like we have with all sorts of other things.
Right. It's going to be. I mean, I don't know that this is going to go away, even with a vaccine. And you even think about it from this perspective, for all the people who are freaking out about vaccines, I mean, you have to get the flu vaccine every year. It doesn't, you're a layer of protection. It doesn't mean you're not going to get it. It weakens the symptoms at best in most people, the vast majority of people. And, but we have to learn how to live with it. We're wind up hopefully treating it like flu season in a couple of years, but we all have to take the steps necessary. I understand not everyone can get vaccinated, but we have to take those steps. But I'm not willing to slow down my life out of fear. And I think you're in the same place. I think, Scott, you're in the same place. And it's time for us to take precautions, but let's move on. But I'll tell you something, someone who's not moving And that was a segue.
Put them ching.
Nice.
So we didn't talk about this last week because it hadn't happened yet, but the Jackie Johnson, the former Brunswick Judicial Circuit prosecutor, district attorney, was charged with, 2 counts. According to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, she was indicted last Thursday on 2 counts following an inquiry by the GBI that had been called for by Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr. She has been charged with obstruction of a police officer, which is a misdemeanor. And let's see, I'm trying to find, indicted for allegedly violating her oath of office, which is a felony, because she showed favor and affection to Greg McMichael, and who is Travis McMichael's father, and is also charged in this particular case, that case being the murder of Ahmaud Arbery early last year.
If I remember correctly, Greg, the older McMichael, at one point in time worked for her as an investigator, right?
That's right. She badly botched the investigation. Of course, she was defeated when she ran for re-election, thank God. But this particular instance, or this particular case, is one that I think obviously, I think George Floyd, what happened to the officer in that particular circumstance, charged with murder, convicted of murder. Obviously, Jackie Johnson did not do that, but she tried to essentially
sweep it under the rug for her friend. Essentially,
that's better than how I was going to put it. Yeah, right. And treat it sort of business as usual. Obviously, and the judge in the case has said that Arbery's past interactions with law enforcement can't be used in the defendant's case,
because he didn't know. Yeah, the defendant didn't know. Yeah. What was interesting about that case when it broke was that it had happened so long from the actual event until we started hearing about it.
Right.
It was months. Right. And part of the reason why was because Jackie Johnson was busily trying to keep it from becoming public. And it wasn't until we had that cell phone video from the guy who was riding behind those guys filming it, who leaked the video, that it began to gain any traction whatsoever. That person was fearful for their life. Frankly, they were, what do I do with this? Should I go public or not? This is being swept under the rug clearly, and nothing was going to happen in that case. Ahmaud Arbery may not have been a household name. We may never have heard about him if that guy hadn't come forward with that video evidence.
Yeah, and you also have the accusations of racial epithets that were used after he was murdered or after he was shot. I don't know that he had expired yet, but this is an obvious, I guess, attempted trying to keep justice from happening, and I'm glad to see that that she was charged. She turned herself in. Obviously, she'll stand trial. What happens next is obviously up to a jury, but it's certainly hard not to see where there was a gross violation of her oath, and look, it's up to the jury of the peers, but it's pretty, from sitting here in my perspective, I see this as pretty cut and dry. So
she is a lawyer, so I'm sure she's going to be involved in her own defense somehow, and working with her attorneys to develop a very sturdy defense. That being said, I think with all the eyes and attention that are on this particular case in this proceeding, that they can't show any type of favoritism whatsoever. Otherwise, they're going to get called on it. And so that gives me hope that, the trial will be fair, and, she'll have to face that jury and put her fate in those 12 individuals' hands.
It just, and to kind of continue on with this theme for a second, just the broader context, because obviously you had George Floyd, you had Breonna Taylor, obviously the debate over policing, no-knock raids, chokeholds. That hasn't gone anywhere federally because Republicans and Democrats can't seem to get get on the same page in terms of what the priorities are. Obviously qualified immunity is a part of the discussion, but that's not the only issue that even exists as far as policing goes. And I think I've said this before, Democrats wanted to go too far. Republicans didn't want to go far enough. and it certainly seemed like, I mean, look, I'm gonna say this. It certainly seemed like Cory Booker, not so much. I don't think Karen Bass was an honest actor when it came to these negotiations, but I think Cory Booker was truly interested in getting something done. But Tim Scott,
Tim Scott, right?
I don't know that Scott seemed to be the one who was moving the goalposts. And that's what I could, and this is, I'm looking at this through a federal lens, and right. It seemed like Scott was moving the goalposts. Obviously there was and there are questions remain, like, one of the big hiccups that we had was the release of the draft legislation, like a discussion draft that wound up in the hands of Politico and published online in a story that kind of blew things up there for a minute. And here we are. I mean, we keep, we got to have this done by the end of June. We got to have this done by the end of July. We're going to have it done before August recess. And here we are. The Senate comes back next week, and we're nowhere near a deal on policing. And it's starting to make me wonder. I mean, well, it didn't start to make me wonder, but it's obvious it's not going to happen.
Yeah, but so let me pose this theory. These things will be better addressed at the state level, right?
You're not wrong.
I think, I think, we can point to the Georgia legislature. There was, pretty immediately a broad bipartisan consensus that we should make substantial changes. We had Burt Reeves on our podcast who was leading that effort to substantially reform Georgia's citizen arrest law, which happened. And I think there are other things a lot of other things that we should take a look at on the state level that could improve this situation.
And there has been some efforts at the state level here in the legislature to tackle the issue of sovereign immunity, which has to happen as well. I think, and that's part of this. For those who don't know, sovereign immunity is this concept where if you have your rights violated, you have to ask permission from the government to sue them for restitution and to defend your rights. And if you don't get that permission, the court case is basically tossed. And so it's almost impossible to gain standing in any types of these cases because of sovereign immunity. That is a law here in Georgia. And there are several more influential members of the legislature who attempt to take on that issue. I think Chuck F. Stration out of Gwinnett County is one of those guys who, Andy Welch made it one of his missions to try. And we actually passed a bill. It ended up getting vetoed. And for whatever reason, we didn't overturn it. We had the votes to overturn it, but we didn't. And we should have at least tried, I think.
I mean, I think
I guess my larger point is that it's just so hard to get anything done in Washington right now. And that's not new. It's been that way for a while. I don't see it changing, no matter what the results of the 2022 election are on the federal level, is nobody's going to have a majority large enough to just pass these types of bills through, whatever their views are. So I think I don't should turn their efforts to the state level to get stuff done.
I don't disagree with you. And I've said many a times over the course of the past year and a half that this is predominantly a state and local issue. That said, Congress does have ways to use the power of the purse to help facilitate changes. And I say facilitate, I'm not saying force, I'm saying facilitate changes at the state and local level. You can do that through grant funding, Burn JAG, COPS grants. Burn JAG is the Burn Justice Assistance Grant Program. You can use that as a way to expand programming to expand existing programming, to do and bring new programming for other forms of training that you need or that police officers need. Those are ways you can do it. Obviously, you can use some of that too to facilitate changes like banning chokeholds or ending no-knock warrants, which are things I'm supportive of. It's when you get into some of the things that Democrats wanted, where we're gonna eliminate qualified immunity, but only for cops, which was what they tried to do in the Justice and Policing Act. Or we're going to have a nationwide police misconduct database that's not going to really have any privacy protections at all. And if your law enforcement agency doesn't participate in it, you don't get any federal funding for anything. That's the kind of that stuff is a load of crap. But there are ways to facilitate better training for officers. And when I say facilitate, I truly mean facilitate, not force.
Right.
So But yeah.
And you have to do it right, as we've talked before, because, we hear anecdotal stories that there are a lot of officers across Georgia, across the country, who are leaving the force. As I was going downtown Saturday to the game, there's these billboards. Gwinnett County Police is offering a $2,000 signing bonus. So that they're trying to entice people. That indicates that they're having a hard time hiring people. There could be a number of factors for that, but certainly all of these things have made it less appealing. All these things that have occurred since the death of Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd have made it less appealing to be a police officer. So that creates a whole other set of problems.
I am sure that's true, and you hear that of other places as well, and I wish there was a silver bullet for that. I mean, right. I mean, I think anybody who works in government, broadly speaking, particularly teachers and law enforcement, are probably underpaid.
And it's a sucky job right now.
Yeah, especially
all those things are.
Yeah, it is. But at the same time, it's some of the look. I am not a fan of the defund the police stuff. I think we need a well-trained law enforcement. I think we need. I hesitate to say more law enforcement, but we need law enforcement. I mean, I don't know about you two, but my home has been broken into. It's been 10 years, but my home has been broken into. I called the police. I called the local sheriff's department to come out and investigate.
Right.
I'll be honest. I'm glad law enforcement's there. At the same time, I just want them to. I want them to act within the color of law. Yeah. And I want to see better training. I want to see things change where people, where they're going after actual crimes and rather than petty crimes and stupid stuff like that. So, Scott, you got anything you add before we move on?
No.
Well, Scott is well spoken as always. So moving on to some more Georgia politics, more specific to races. Obviously, last week we talked about Vernon Jones and his supposed endorsement from Herschel Walker that never actually happened. Herschel Walker, as Scott said, was probably Scott or Buzz. I don't remember which one of you. You both sound the same. I mean, Herschel Walker, being smart about it, didn't want to. He's got his own race to worry about. Don't get in the middle of another race. But Brian Kemp did pick up a number of endorsements recently.
Dare I say hundreds of endorsements.
Including from state legislators, but there were some notable names not on that list of endorsements. Scott, you want to tell us?
Yeah, starting I guess with the Speaker of the House, David Ralston, was not on that list of legislators. That was, I think, an eye-opening thing. I don't know why the Speaker wouldn't go ahead and throw his weight behind, no pun intended, behind the governor. But he didn't. He chose not to. There were a couple of other House members who didn't. That were notable exceptions. Philip Singleton, who we've spoken about on the podcast. Sherry Gilligan also did not. But also over on the Senate side, there were a couple of notable names missing. Burt Jones, who we'll talk about in a second, getting the Trump endorsement for lieutenant governor, was not on that list, and neither was Senator Brandon Beach, who famously faked an endorsement from Governor Kemp in his last reelect, and yet couldn't bring himself to add his name to the gigantic list of legislators who were endorsing Brian Kemp. I thought that was absolutely fascinating that he chose not to endorse the governor.
Maybe he's coming with a fake endorsement of Kemp later on, huh?
Well, if I were Kemp, I would just put his name on the list. Kind of like, tit for tat.
Can we just, I feel like I can't recall that we've ever, I mean, I'm sure we've said this before, but I can't specifically recall it. Can we just put the charade that Brian Kemp is not going to be renominated behind us? He's going to be the nominee.
Here's the question. And I tweeted this out yesterday. And this is the question. And if you're from the Vernon Jones camp, you're listening to this. This is my question for you. Are you going to support the governor when he earns the GOP nomination? That's Vernon Jones. Vernon, are you going to support the governor when he earns the nomination? Because he's going to. and we're going to need your guys to get behind our effort. Otherwise, we're going to have a Democratic governor. And we've seen the trends. We know the numbers are against us. We need everybody to come together at a certain point. And I believe that point is coming because the Vernon Jones campaign is flailing around. They're faking endorsements from Herschel Walker. They're trying to claim credit for Trump coming later this month for a rally down in Middle Georgia. And it's almost as if they're doing everything they can to say, we're here too, we're here too, we're here too, but they've got no traction. The governor is going to easily walk into the renomination for the GOP side.
Let me hold on 1 second though. Let's Buzz. Let me say this, and then you chime in with what you got. But I think you're right about Vernon, and he needs to say it because if you're a Republican, I imagine you want on all hands on deck.
Right. Right.
That said, you mentioned another name that I think is going to be pretty important for Brian Kemp too, and that is Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. So if Trump's candidate loses, is Trump going to support Brian Kemp? I think that's a question every Georgia Republican should be asking themselves.
Well, to this point, Trump doesn't have a candidate, right? Because he looks at the race. He knows Vernon Jones can't win. He clearly encouraged, and there are public news stories about Trump encouraging Vernon Jones to run, but he fails to give him the endorsement. He came out with 2 major endorsements this week, one of Herschel Walker and the other of Burt Jones for lieutenant governor. And he has still yet to endorse Vernon Jones, which tells you that Vernon Jones is not the Trump candidate. So there is no Trump candidate in the race against Brian Kemp.
I think you're technically, sorry, Buzz. I think let me just say, you're technically right, but Trump world, I mean, is like Bernie Carrick is working for Vernon Jones. So, yep. And Bernie Carrick has staked a lot of his credit.
And Rudy was down here.
Rudy Giuliani came. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Rudy came for a fundraiser for Vernon. Yeah, very clearly. And yet there's still no traction for that campaign.
Buzz, I've cut you off twice. I apologize. Go ahead.
What I was going to say was Vernon Jones tweeted today the results of a poll that his campaign commissioned by the Trafalgar Group, making the assertion that if Donald Trump would endorse Vernon Jones, and Vernon Jones would win the Republican nomination. And yeah, I think he's desperately trying to get that official endorsement, seeing that these other guys are getting these endorsements, and whether that I mean, I find that interesting. When a couple of weeks ago, Trump released a poll showing that David Perdue, a more respected Republican within Republican circles, the best that he could hope for would be to
go to a runoff.
Phone is ringing in here. Would be to force Kemp to do a runoff. So excuse me.
Some of us put our phones on mute, Buzz.
Yeah, I didn't either.
My phone is on mute, but my mom. I didn't realize my mom's phone was in here. So,
but that's the point, right? Is that Trump released that poll trying to encourage David Perdue to run, because even though Vernon's already in the race. So clearly Vernon's not the guy. He's not Trump's guy.
Yeah.
Well, I think I think what the interesting question that you guys are raising is if Trump, it's, all the doors are being closed. Perdue's not going to run. Burt Jones turned him down. There was apparently a lot of pressure on Burt Jones to run for governor by Trump instead of lieutenant governor. He decided not to do it. Doug Collins is out. All these people are out. There's this mayor of Washington, Georgia, who's floating around that doesn't seem to be lighting the world on fire. So when his back's against the wall, is Trump going to endorse Vernon Jones or not? Clearly, Vernon wants it to happen, but would he?
And at this
Trump
point,
willing to risk his brand on a guy who would get stomped? I mean, look, it's going to be tough for Brian Kemp if Stacey Abrams runs. It's going to be a dogfight. Has Stacey Abrams would pound Vernon Jones into the ground.
Has David Perdue endorsed Brian Kemp?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I haven't heard.
Sonny Perdue, has said very nice things about Kemp, and recently.
Yeah, he was at the fish fry.
Sonny is not David, but they don't often part ways politically. So
yeah, but
Correct.
Sonny was one of Trump's longest serving cabinet members.
And has at the fish fry did introduce Brian Kemp and told the crowd to be respectful, which limited the boos according to some. There's a small group of Vernon supporters going to every event now booing and so they can say that the governor was getting boos, but it's pretty much the same small group of people everywhere you go.
I don't think that David Perdue has officially endorsed anybody. He appeared at a Burt Jones event. He's appeared at some other candidates' events, and then when pressed, is this an endorsement? Has not said they're not, or said they are.
That may be the case. I was just asking because I was just curious, and I figured
that's a name that was not on that long list of well-heeled politicos and politicians who were endorsing the Governor Kemp again.
You guys would know. You guys would know better than I would. So,
but here's the last thing I'll say. This is the last word I'll have on the Vernon Jones and the list of endorsements that came for the governor from the legislature. Even the people who did not endorse the governor, who were Republicans, are not going to endorse Vernon Jones because they served with him. And the fact that we all served with Vernon Jones in the legislature, and I wasn't on the list. I wasn't asked to be on the list, but all these Republicans that served with Vernon very clearly and loudly spoke in unison saying, Governor Kemp is our guy, tells you everything you need to know about Vernon Jones and his time in the legislature. He was not a Republican. He wasn't even close to a Republican. He was not close to being conservative. He was a liberal on a great deal of the many issues that are concerning to conservatives. So I think it was very telling at the end of the day that Vernon is not picking up any endorsements from the people who knew him best, that served next to him side by side in the legislature while he was there. Not one.
So moving along, we have a new book release from a Georgia Politico that is Lieutenant Governor Geoff Duncan, who this week, I guess rolled out. You can pre-order it now. GOP 2.0, how the 2020 election can lead to a better way forward for America's conservative party. The book is now available. Again, it's available for pre-order. Probably can get it on Amazon. I have it. I think it's not a bestseller, but it
went to number one bestseller on Amazon.
Okay, I hadn't seen that. That's great. But Duncan is obviously not running for re-election, only serving one term as lieutenant governor. He's focusing a lot of his efforts on this GOP 2.0 effort, which he has a whole website. It's gop2.org. I probably won't read this book. I probably won't buy it because my reading has been solely based on like the last year of the disaster that was Trump's presidency.
Well, this is a book about the Trump presidency ultimately. So
yeah, but it's more political science. So not so much presidential history. But I'm curious. Have either of you guys had a chance to look at the book?
I've read it. Just in full disclosure, I'm helping Geoff with his GOP 2.0 efforts. So I got an advanced copy. The book. It's probably half and half. It's half, the post-election madness from Geoff's viewpoint, things that happened and went on. It's not a book that's, I know he's been labeled a never Trumper and all this sort of stuff. That's not what this is. He's not. It's more sadness and shock and astounded at the events that took place than it is. Let me post a book that rips Trump to shreds. The second half of the book is what Geoff thinks that Republicans ought to be doing, and that's what the GOP 2.0 idea is. That the Republican Party, and just in short, ought to be a party of ideas and a party that's optimistic and forward-looking and putting together coalitions of like-minded people that can win and have a growth and opportunity for everybody. So
Scott,
he's doing the media rounds. He was on Morning Joe this morning. There's an article in the Washington Post, an interview with an opinion piece about it today, and there'll be more in the future. So
yeah, I don't know if I'll be able to bring myself to read it. I probably should. I probably owe Geoff that as a friend to read it, but I don't know. The issues I have are not what are widely distributed as public knowledge. So I just don't think I have a lot of excitement about Geoff being the messenger for this particular cause. From the way that he chose to govern to the way he aligned himself with certain people, that it still stings to me. I'm over it, but I don't know that I would go to hear him speak about it. I just don't think that he's the guy to be that messenger. I just don't.
I think I'm not disagreeing with you and make that clear, but I think, and I don't know Geoff that well. I've met him a few times. I mean, look, I'll go as far as to say, I'm a fan, not because of his. I mean, I liked him before all this stuff went down. But I think the way you're looking, this is not how you perceive him through your knowledge of Georgia politics, through being a state legislator, serving with him, is not how he's going to be perceived on a national scale. Like I get it. If his project takes off, he's going to be the former lieutenant governor of Georgia who's trying to take the Republican Party back to its roots. That's what he's going to be. And
you know what? I hope he's successful. I do. I just, for me, because of the things that I saw that I'm not going to talk about. It's hard for me. It's like, it's just hard for me. I have a lot of, it's a struggle because I love him as a brother. I love him as a friend. But I have a hard time accepting him as the messenger on this issue.
Yeah. Understandable.
I'll say, there are always, there are always things there are people who get into positions of leadership as Geoff did, and they do things that we don't agree with or don't agree with, as the case may be. I think that, to a larger point, whether Geoff is the right messenger for this project, remains to be seen. He's I think even Scott would agree with this. He's very smart, capable. He's an incredibly effective communicator.
Brilliant.
He's a guy who can wow a crowd. And I've seen him with my own eyeballs as I was out on the campaign trail, and he was too, running for lieutenant governor while I was running for secretary of state. The man can knock it out of the park, to use the baseball analogy there. But whether he's the right messenger for this or not, it remains to be seen, and that's part of what he's trying to do. However, I think to take a step back from that, away from Geoff Duncan personally, and my personal affection for him and my efforts to help him with that, to be that guy. He's tapped in what he's talking about. I sense in conversations that I've had with people across the country, and I'll explain a little bit about that in just a second. There is a market for this. There is a palpable desire to see the GOP do something different. And what Geoff's talking about is there are people like Liz Cheney, for example, who want to who say, all right, Trump is gone. Now it's time to go back to what the GOP was back when her dad was in his heyday, because that was the vision that she and folks like her have for the GOP. I don't think that's possible. I don't think that's desirable. There were good things and bad things about that era of the GOP. Now there's the Trump version of the GOP, and there are people who want to continue down Trump's path. A lot of people in the Republican Party want to continue down the path that Trump has set us on nationalism and populism. That's not me either. So I think what Geoff is trying to find is, okay, there could be something different. And I think there's a market for that out there. Last week, I was down in Orlando, the State Policy Network annual meeting. It's a collection of state-based think tanks across the country. I work for one, the Georgia Center for Opportunity. Georgia Public Policy Foundation is another SPN affiliate in Georgia. I don't know how many of them, but there's multiple ones in every state across the country. These are conservatives who are out there trying to advocate for conservative policy solutions within their state. And in multiple meetings that I attended, and dozens of people that I talked to, I didn't bring up Geoff's name and it wasn't a conference to bash Trump or to praise Trump. It was, but in conversations over and over and over again, it would come up, man, I just wish Trump would shut up and let us do our work. And so I think now that may not, these are nonpartisan policy people who will probably not rush to the newspapers or the microphones to say that publicly, but that it's there and it's palpable. And if somebody can tap into it, there's something there. And obviously Geoff hopes to be a guy who can do that. And we'll see if he can or not. And look, I know, some of the decisions that Geoff made that Scott disagrees with and that I disagree with were he received advice from his former campaign manager, who then became his chief of staff, who is now on Twitter night and day as one of Geoff's chief critics, ripping him and attacking him. Sort of like Brad Raffensperger's former campaign manager is out there with things to say about Brad Raffensperger. So it's a curious thing. These guys who then turn on the candidate they'd help elect. But I think we'll see if Geoff is a guy who can pull this off. But there's a market for this.
This isn't a side, and it has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But since we did bring up Trump a couple of times, and since we have been here, Buzz, while you were talking, I just ran across a statement from former President Trump related to the statue of Robert E. Lee that was pulled down today in Richmond. And I want to read from you guys the part of the last paragraph. If only we had Robert E. Lee to command our troops in Afghanistan, that disaster would have ended in a complete and total victory many years ago. What an embarrassment we are suffering because we don't have the genius of a Robert E. Lee. I swear I thought he hated losers.
I mean, look, you can. It's one thing to respect the tactical brilliance of Robert E. Lee, which he outsmarted many a Northern general until Grant came along and smashed him. He was wrong. He was on the wrong side of that war, and for Trump to, it's dang. I don't know what else to say other than dang.
Scott, you had something you wanted to say. No, I just thought that was a clever statement by you that he supposedly doesn't like losers. I'm glad Robert E. Lee lost for a lot of reasons.
It takes a loser to know a loser.
I don't know why the former president of the United States feels like he needs to weigh in on that issue, other than to score points with a base in hopes of keeping them galvanized heading into another election attempt. And if that's the case, we've got other issues we need to be working on. And I'm just not excited about it. I'm not excited about the comments. I'm not excited about the whole thing. And I'm disappointed that would be his hot take. Of all the things you could possibly say in this moment, you try to say, oh gosh, I wish I had that guy on our team right now leading the charge in Afghanistan. Well, you know what, Bubba, you were in charge of Afghanistan for 4 years. And what'd you do?
You didn't end the war.
You didn't. I mean, you tried, I guess. I mean, but you didn't.
If you guys
negotiated out of weakness with the Taliban.
If you guys haven't read I Alone Can Fix It, you should, because there's an entire there are parts of that book that are actually dedicated to the deal with the Taliban, and it's really stark because everything that was written in that book wound up happening. And so you guys, if you want to borrow my copy, I'm happy to bring it up to you guys next time I see you guys, bring it with me. But you should read it. I
don't want to go down the whole. We've talked a lot about Afghanistan, but one of the things, it just blows my mind that Joe Biden continued down that path when he has reversed course on so many other things that Trump was doing and trying to do. Why?
Yeah,
historians will puzzle over that for years, I'm sure.
Well, initially I had another topic here for our next to last topic, but I'm going to move up to one that deals with my party, which is the Libertarian Party. Former state representative Ken Pullin, he was a Republican, I believe served only one term, and he was elected in 2018, defeated Johnny Caldwell in District 131. So he has left the Republican Party and switched parties, joining the Libertarian Party. So it is not unheard of for this to happen for a former elected official, Republican or Democrat, usually Republican, to switch parties and join the Libertarian Party. Bob Barr was the Republican member of Congress who joined the Libertarian Party, ran for president as a Libertarian in 2008. I worked on that campaign. Obviously, Gary Johnson's another notable example, who was a governor for 8 years in New Mexico and was the Libertarian Party's nominee in 2012 and 2016. And of course, Ron Paul, another great example of probably what some people would say is the best example of a Republican who joined the Libertarian Party and then went back to being a Republican. So I'm curious to get you guys' reaction, because Scott, I know you served with State Representative Pullin.
I did, and I love Ken. Ken is a friend of mine, and I adore him. I'm confused by this particular move on his part. I haven't spoken to him about it, but I think I've made my stance on this podcast and in other places very clear that the Republican Party is the natural home for liberty-loving individuals. Ken is a libertarian-leaning Republican, and he feels right now, like a lot of other Republicans, maybe that could get captured in that 2.0 movement, I suppose, that the party is sort of heading in the wrong direction on a policy-wise. He looks at the spending and the national debt, and he looks at that and he says, "What are we doing this for? Why are we as a party contributing to the problems?" And I think the best way you fix that is you stay engaged and active within the Republican Party, and you work for candidates that will bring the party back to those roots. I don't think going to a third party that has absolutely no shot of ever gaining any type of legitimacy is the answer. I know it made a nice little headline for the LP on their own little website, but it wasn't widely picked up as a news story. We talk about it here because we're Georgia politics centric and we know these people. But at the end of the day, I just, my instant gut reaction was, what a waste, because Ken is a brilliant guy. He's articulate. He's passionate. He's an ideologue on the issues, and he's a bit of a purist. He wants to see the party stay conservative, and I think that he's going about it the wrong way.
So I'm going to come back to that in a second, but I want to read the quote and buzz before I go back to what Scott said. I want to get your reaction to, but this is the quote from former State Representative Pullin. The Republican leadership was more interested in growing government and maintaining power than focusing on liberty and small government policies. Leadership would routinely partner with Democrats to push through big government policies and showed no interest in unconstitutional gun laws, civil asset forfeiture, cannabis laws, lack of ballot access, or school choice. There's basically zero difference between Republicans and Democrats in Atlanta.
See, go ahead. I'll let Buzz.
Well, I would think, I don't know Ken very well. I've met him a few times. We're friends on Facebook, et cetera. That's the extent of my relationship with Ken. But when he decided not to run again, I kind of got the sense that he got elected. He had certain ideas about what he wanted to do and what it would be like when he got there. And I think that quote kind of plays into kind of what my thinking was, that he became disillusioned with Republican leadership under the dome and now apparently the Republican Party as a whole. But I think that it seems to me this kind of goes hand in hand with his decision to not seek re-election. Is just he didn't see any value and couldn't abide what was going on in the legislature. So Scott, him better than I do.
think
Scott,
that's a fairly
am I onto something or
no? For you not knowing him, I think you've pretty much nailed it. Ken was one of the 12 signers on the resolution asking Ralston to resign after the story broke about the use of legislative leave in cases like rape cases lasting 10, 15, 20 years. And I think that was kind of the first step in towards him becoming disillusioned, because he saw the Democrats completely clam up, right? It was only 12 Republicans who stood up and said, this is not right. What's happening here is an abuse of power. It was only 12 Republicans. And he thought for sure the Democrats would stand up, but he saw what ended up happening. We had on the same day that the caucus chairman brought a bill to reform healthcare and work on the certificate of need, which is a whole complex issue. Let's just say certificate of need reform is needed in Georgia. And one of our members of leadership in the House brought that. And he saw Democrats team up with Republicans to kill that effort to reform this really nasty policy that actually kills innovation and drives up costs in healthcare in Georgia and has no evidence of better outcomes whatsoever. When he saw that happen, in combination with a couple of the other things I've already mentioned, that same day, Democrats started walking to the well and introducing their bills and getting them passed. And in the past, if a Republican stepped out of line in the House of Representatives and they said, I'm going to vote no on a bill that's going to pass anyway, their bills would die. And so I think that's what he's pointing to when he says that Democrats and Republicans team up to grow government in this way. I can point to some specific examples like that where Ken would be justified in feeling that way. However, I go back to what's the most effective way to drive change in the Republican Party, and it's not by going and joining a group of people who have no shot at making any difference whatsoever.
I think, and you said that multiple times on the podcast, and I don't want to get into a long debate about this, but as someone who has, as someone who has been both a Libertarian Party member in the past as well as a Republican in the past, and seen how Republicans, particularly at the local level, treat philosophically minded libertarians, the small L libertarian. And not just that. I mean, at the federal level as well. I mean, how they treat libertarian ideas, how some of the libertarian minded members are treated. I can't help but understand why, because, and especially if you look at the direction, and I've said this before, but you look at the direction of the conservative movement, it is basically becoming this European style Christian Democrat. And I'm not saying that as a pejorative or anything like that. It's like the German Christian Democratic Party. It's this socialist light movement that it's basically, a European style compassionate conservatism with this extreme version of social conservatism. Mm-hmm. I think turns off a lot of libertarians. And I've said this a few times this past week. People keeps talking about because the Libertarian Party always has these debates over between right libertarians and left libertarians. You're either a libertarian or you're not, kind of thing. And the libertarian ideals are just not, even on markets today, even on economic issues today, aren't really accepted inside the Republican Party, not to the extent they used to be. And I'll also add this too, and I would go as far as to say that it is time for because Reagan talked about fusionism quite a bit. He said the heart and soul of conservatism is libertarianism. Yeah, he talked about his core philosophy being a libertarian. But and obviously Reagan had his faults of the war on drugs being part of it, but Democrats were just as bad as Reagan was. We had the 100-to-1 crack cocaine disparity, largely because of Joe Biden, for God's sakes. Right. But all that said, I am of the mind at this point in time that it is time for a divorce between libertarians and conservatives. It no longer functions. It's a marriage that doesn't work anymore. Libertarians may not be able to stand on their own. Scott, to your point, you might be right. But at the end of the day, I do think people are thirsting for something different. And I'm not saying libertarians are going to go out and win elections tomorrow. I think there's a lot of work the party needs to do to become to be viable in the long term. But at the same time, I would rather run and I'm not going to run for office, but if I was going to run for office, I would be embarrassed to run with an R next to my name.
Well, so you are a libertarian, Republican libertarian. I was a libertarian before I became a Republican. I was involved in the state party as well. I got involved in my local. None of the things you talk about being rejected happened to me. I got elected as a Republican, running as a libertarian leaning Republican. And I didn't shy away from my ideology, and I got elected. I got elected with huge margins and reelected by gigantic margins because the way I governed was in line with the values of the people that I represented. And I also did the work. I don't think it's time for a divorce. I've said this in the past, a renewing of the vows maybe, but not a divorce. I think there needs to be a recommitment to some of those principles, and you're just not going to do it by going to support a campaign or an organization who nominated a guy whose part of his platform for vice president of the United States was free Waffle House for everybody. It's just not a serious organization.
Wait a minute, if I'd have known that,
I mean, that is
I might have lost my vote, man.
But free Waffle House, socialized Waffle House is probably the worst thing like that could possibly happen.
It just goes to the point that it is a ridiculous, they we had the Ryan on a couple of weeks ago, and he was like, I'd have to support a candidate like David Perdue. And I didn't have time to squeeze this in. Who are the candidates you are supporting? They're ridiculous. They're not qualified for the positions that they run for. They don't have any opportunity to show themselves as capable because they don't get elected to the lower offices. They don't move up the ranks. They don't move up the ladder. And the reason why is because, you go to an LP convention and you see somebody stripped down naked on the stage. And these are not things I'm making up. These are things that are real. And so the Libertarian Party is not the answer to Representative Pullin's concerns. His concerns are real and they have merit, and he saw it for himself. So all of that I'm saying is that he's choosing the wrong path to try to fix it.
I will remind you that the guiding light for the Republican Party right now is a man who openly talks about grabbing women by their genitalia, and who
yes, and the president of the United States from the other party actually did grab somebody, according to alleged reports. So in that manner, that the former president,
but you're not a Democrat. I'm not advocating for Joe Biden. We're talking about the Republican Party, whose standard bearer is Donald fucking Trump. And
the message I'm getting is that they all suck. Is that what I'm hearing?
But it's a message in how you get to less suckiness, right? I mean, that's kind of where I'm trying to head.
Sure.
Do you get to less suckiness by abandoning the Republican Party and going and joining a bunch of guys who will strip down naked on stage, or do you actually do the work to try to get?
At least it's entertaining. At least it's entertaining. There's no violence that happens. Unlike on January 6th with a mob who had been convinced by Trump that he, in his lies, that they could overturn the election. I'm sorry. No libertarian mobs didn't show up to the that's the thing about the Republican Party. It's not just that it's captivated by Trump. It's blind loyalty. It is blind loyalty to a man who has no core principles, who doesn't give a crap about anybody who votes for him.
And this is where
he just wants power, and
this is where
the Republican Party is right now, Scott.
But this is where I won't disagree with you that there's blind loyalty to the person, which is concerning to me, and me staying active in my local party and in the state party and nationally as well. My involvement is to hope to pull people away from loyalty to a person or one person, and loyalty to the ideals that we can all share. And that's the way that I think that we fix the things that if I concede all the things that you've said is true, Jason, I think the way you fix it is staying involved and having voices in the room who can articulate this message. And you don't do that by leaving.
And just to circle back, if I might, just for a second to Ken, I think I've never been one to lecture libertarians and say, well, you've got to join with us to stand against the left, because I've always thought we ought to go out and earn the votes of the folks who want to make Libertarian Party their home, and obviously Ken is a guy that the Republican Party has lost. There's probably more people who were lost to Joe Biden this last election. I know some people who. We both GOP will probably never get back because of the Trump years, and who have gone left. So the Republican Party's got problems. Whether Ken made the right decision or not, that's for him to decide, not for me to decide. But I will say, the Libertarian Party, if they haven't already, they ought to be on the phone to Ken right now, trying to get him to run for that House seat. Because he might be able to pull it off because he won down there before. I'm not advocating for that because I'm a Republican, but I'm just saying if a marketplace of ideas will be better, a viable Libertarian Party will be better. I just earlier in this podcast I made my pitch for why a GOP 2.0 type thing that Geoff Duncan is talking about is what the GOP ought to be doing. That's why I'm helping him with that project. But the Democrats stink too, and they've got their own internal war going on too. So there's a lot of turmoil in our politics these days. There's a tremendous lack of leadership. There's a tremendous lack of quality people stepping up to lead these various parties, and that ought to concern us all.
I agree. And one thing I would be remiss if I didn't mention this, and I'll move on to our final topic, but the Libertarian Party, all third parties and independents did score a bit of a court victory last week. Judge Lee May Martin from the U.S. District Court of the Northern District of Georgia issued a ruling that prohibits Secretary Raffensperger from enforcing the 5% petition requirement that is currently part of state law. Instead, they're going to enforce only a 1% requirement, and that's equal to the requirement necessary for an entity to gain status as a political body under Georgia law. So that substantially lowers the threshold that third parties need and independents need to get on to run a candidate. So instead of 5% of all,
if I could just insert, Jason, I'm thinking practically. I had a lady try to get on a ballot against me in my district. As I recall, she needed roughly 1,550 votes, somewhere in that range. So that knocks that down, quite significantly. So
yeah, it was 5% of all registered voters from the previous election, I think.
Yeah.
So now it's 1%. So I don't want to belabor that because I know Scott's probably done talking about the Libertarian Party. So yep. On to our final topic. This one is a bit of a culture war discussion. So recently, last week, the Supreme Court refused to issue a stay against the new Texas abortion law, and it has caused a lot of consternation amongst all my friends, it seems. A lot of Facebook posts, a lot of tweets. And it's one, I've said this before we got on, I largely avoid discussions about abortion because I have my personal views on this subject. And my personal views are it's the toughest decision a woman will ever make. And I don't feel like my opinion matters. I'm a man. That said, I understand where a lot of social conservatives, particularly evangelicals, come from on this issue. Not just evangelicals, but also Catholics, and I get it. But the law stands, and some people have very strong opinions about this. And one of the opinions that was voiced was the CEO of a tech company that I think actually is based in Atlanta, if I recall correctly.
Yes, second largest video game developer in Georgia.
Yeah,
Tripwire.
Tripwire is the name of the company. John Gibson, who was the CEO of Tripwire, basically expressed support for the Texas law, and then not long after he had stepped down. Which what went on behind the scenes, I don't know, but the official story is he resigned, and the co-founder of the company is taking over as interim CEO. This one's it's even in philosophically libertarian circles, abortion is a divisive issue. Because I would say that there are two issues on which libertarians have disagreement. One of those is abortion, the other being immigration. But like I said before, I can understand both sides of the argument. This seems wrong. And I say that as someone who is very socially libertarian. It seems wrong for someone to feel, whether he felt pressured, I'm sure he did. I don't know what happened behind the scenes.
Well, there's a story on BBC that I think enlightens a little bit. It includes the tweet. So if I may.
Absolutely, Scott.
So John Gibson's tweet said, "Proud of the U.S. Supreme Court affirming the Texas law banning abortion for babies with a heartbeat. As an entertainer, I don't get political often. Yet with so many vocal peers on the other side of this issue, I felt it was important to go on the record as a pro-life game developer." And then the BBC story talks about the reaction, and the Torn Banner Studios tweeted shortly thereafter, "We do not share the opinion expressed in a recent tweet by the president of Tripwire, publisher of Chivalry 2, that's the game. The perspective is not shared by our team, nor is it reflected in the games we create. The statement stands in opposition to what we believe about women's rights." The Torn Banner is one of the subcontractors that they use. And there's another one, Shipwright Studios, was a work for hire studio that contributed to some of the Tripwire's games, wrote that it was ending its 3-year relationship because of Mr. Gibson's comments. So it's in their statement, it says, "While your politics are your own, the moment you make them a matter of public discourse, you entangle all those working for and with you. We cannot in good conscience continue to work with Tripwire under the current leadership, and will begin the cancellation of our existing contract." So you had the Tripwire said Vice President co-founder Alan Wilson would take over as interim chief, promising to listen to remaining concerns from employees and external partners. The idea here is that it created workplace conflict. His public support and statements that this is the double standard in the cancel culture. And even if it was the other side, and I was on the other side of this issue, there comes a time when we have to understand that this is a divisive issue. It's a 50-50 issue. It wouldn't have changed his point of view on it if he hadn't tweeted it. He felt it was important that as an entertainer, he showed that there were entertainers in the industry that did have his point of view, and that we work in a time and age today in American culture where you're not allowed to have a difference of opinion, and that's really what is the most concerning for me. You don't need a law for this. We don't need, obviously the market's going to take care of it. Did he actually get canceled? Yeah, he got canceled from this job, but I'm pretty sure there's going to be a group of like-minded people, because there's so many of them, that will use his talents to go make a different game, and he'll make money. And, we saw this with when Chick-fil-A said that they supported traditional marriage. All of a sudden, you couldn't get into a Chick-fil-A to buy a chicken sandwich. The lines were around the block, including in New York City, by the way.
Buzz, I'm gonna let you. I'm gonna let you jump in here in a second, because I know also as a pro-life conservative, you have a lot of thoughts too. The thing that I think bothers me, I don't know. I mean, this is it, and both sides do it. The left seems to do it more, for sure, but both sides do it. But I mean, I grew up and still listen to a lot of music written by bands that actually espouse socialist ideals and socialist viewpoints. Propaganda, Refuse, NoFX.
Oh, I love some Rage Against the Machine.
Rage Against the Machine, who are literal communists.
I love their music, though.
I mean, I actually have Evil Empire on vinyl right here. But I grew up listening to that stuff. There are themes in those music that I don't agree with, but I like the music. I appreciate the musicianship. I appreciate fast drums and fast guitars, and good melody as well. And I don't understand. When was it decided that in society we all have to be mindless automatons? Yeah. And the fact of the matter here is, I understand. Like I said, I understand both sides of the issue. I'm willing to live and let live. That is his. It's the same with like the Mozilla CEO from a couple of years ago, or Chick-fil-A, or whatever the case may be. He is entitled to his opinions, or who female, she's entitled to her opinions. Everybody else, we don't have to all agree in the same thing. Otherwise, life is going to be pretty boring. And we, and it just this is. I don't even necessarily agree with what he said. I think there are problems with this law, that the fact that it doesn't provide for the three exceptions, the sort of Orwellian disclosure website that they tried to put together. I don't like those elements of the law, but I understand and respect my friends who are pro-life.
Well, I think that, I know you were asking the question sort of philosophically, when did it become, and I think the answer is when Twitter was created. Find that date, and there's your demarcation line. When we allow for the most extreme on either side to drive the narrative of what we're talking about, that is the problem. It is a divisive issue. There are plenty of people who are pro-life who are going to go and support this guy now. And I'm sure he'll land on his feet again. But the reality is that we have to give each other some grace when we have differing opinions. We have to. Otherwise, it's not that it'd be boring. It'd be absolutely freaking terrifying. If I have a thought that is not in line with what the Twitterati has decided is mainstream today, then am I screwed? And also the ball keeps moving. The goalposts keep moving on what is acceptable and what's not. And if my thoughts today may be perfectly in line with what is allowed today, but if I tweet something and 5 years later it's found to be outside of the mainstream of what Twitterati has decided, I'm totally screwed.
Yeah.
Well, one of the lines I've heard from the left in the last couple of years is that capitalism is racist. I mean, like this is how absurd it's getting. And like, yes, there are policies that have racially disparate outcomes. There are policies. Jim Crow was racist. But calling capitalism racist seems
When capitalism is lifting more people of multicultural backgrounds out of poverty than any other economic system in world history.
Right.
I don't
been cut in half.
Yeah.
Because as capitalist principles spread across the country.
Well, that's.
I agree with many of the things you guys have said. That this is. We don't have to talk about the, this could be any issue. This is just this one happens to be a pro-life issue. And what's curious about that is, as you mentioned, Scott, this is pretty much a 50-50 issue. And so if the people who work at that company are saying we will refuse to allow any, they can say that it was only when he tweeted it. And I think the statement that you read, Scott, were from the subcontractor who said, they when somebody expresses an opinion and entangles the entire company, that's baloney. That's nonsensical. Because how do we live in a pluralistic society if you can't associate, if you refuse to associate with somebody that you have a disagreement on, especially about an issue that's a 50-50 issue in this country?
Right.
It's chilling. It's scary to me because it says that, it makes me wonder if our ability to live together in a pluralistic society is going to be able to survive.
And the right does it too. We all got, not all of us, but there were a lot of people who got upset about kneeling for the national anthem before NFL football games. Or
I had people say, I will never speak to you again because you cheer for the Falcons.
And that's ridiculous.
That means that I agree with everything Colin Kaepernick said. No,
right. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And, and I didn't agree with MLB taking the All-Star game out of Atlanta this year, but I still went to a bunch of baseball games, including with Buzz. So this is where I think if I waited around for people to agree with me 100% before I chose to do business with them, who would I do business with?
Yeah. And Jason, you mentioned, music. The same is true with movies. If the three of us who are right of center people decided I can't watch a movie where the political views of the actors I disagree with, we would never watch a movie.
I mean, I believe Sean Penn is an excellent actor. Just don't let me get into a room with him talking politics. I enjoy his work as an actor, but I'd support his work as an actor, but I'm not going to agree with him politically.
Yeah. I mean, Mark Ruffalo, for example.
Yeah, great example.
Very opinionated and political on Twitter, and very vehement against everything that a bunch of things that Scott and I voted for.
So no, I
still love our movie. I think he's fantastic as the Hulk.
He was fantastic as the Hulk. And one of the things that actually you mentioned his name, it reminded me of something. One of the things that disappointed me so much was a couple of years ago we were working on the Yemen War Powers Act to end the United States involvement in the civil war in Yemen, which the Houthis being backed by Iran and Saudi Arabia backing the Yemeni government. And we were approached by, I forget the name, which group it was. We were approached about having a video done that would have mentioned FreedomWorks and the other group involved. That Mark Ruffalo would have mentioned our groups, would have said you have groups like FreedomWorks and blah blah blah, working together to try to get the United States out of this conflict that was never authorized by Congress. And I had to decline it because it's like, as much as I hate to do it, I mean, I don't agree with him on politics, but I would love to have done this with him, but I can't. Our activist community would kill us for it. It was a tough call to make, but it was the right call.
Yeah. And it disappointed me to see the right becoming more and more like this, boycotting the NFL and, raising all kinds of hell about this, that, or the other thing. And, I'm not going to wear Nike shoes and et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it's exhausting. And
I stopped buying Nikes when I found out. I'm sorry. I stopped buying Nikes when I found out they were using child labor years ago. So, I mean,
that's something to boycott them over. Not
because
Colin Kaepernick took a knee.
Right.
I
exercising his First Amendment right, by the way.
I will admit that I've still bought some Nike gear, but that's like because it's that's the only thing you can get from Georgia Bulldogs website, like the jerseys.
Well, I did have to laugh that when, all right, I thought all these Georgia Bulldog fans who were saying they were going to boycott Nike, when they drag out their Todd Gurley jersey and burn it, then I'll know it's serious. Otherwise,
I mean, I'm not a big Nike fan. I've always had like sort of a bias against Nike, largely because the same issue. Scott,
wait. Can you get a Herschel Walker jersey without a Nike logo these days?
I'm sure you can get it on the sketchy store on eBay.
One thing, officially licensed Herschel Walker jersey. Is it going to be a Nike jersey?
I mean, I think they actually.
It's like that meme where you're like where the guy goes to press the button. You know?
Yeah. So
Nike boycott Nike, buy Herschel Walker jersey.
I had that's actually especially with him running for U.S. Senate. So I had something else to add to this discussion. I have forgotten what it was, but another late kind of story. This is broken since we've been on here. I just want to get you guys quick take, no preparation for it.
These are real live hot takes here.
These are real live hot takes. So this is from Fox News. Law enforcement to reinstall fencing around U.S. Capitol ahead of September 18th rally. There is going to be a rally in front of the Capitol on September 18th in support of the individuals who were arrested during the January 6th protests.
All right, here's a real hot take. She who shall not be named, Congresswoman, and Matt Gaetz from Florida, a couple times showed up outside of detention facilities where allegedly these people were being held, and we're trying to make the case that somehow they're political prisoners. They're not political prisoners. They are people who've been charged with a crime, and many of some of them have already been prosecuted and been, so that's a silly claim. And so if you're going to hold a rally in support of these people, I'm guessing that they're going to try to continue that theme that somehow these are political prisoners, and that would be utterly stupid.
Guess who is speaking at the rally?
She who shall not be named, and
Junior from North Carolina.
Oh,
yeah,
Mr. Cawthorn,
the guy who consistently proves why children should not be elected to public office.
Yeah. So all right. So
all due respect to Michael Caldwell.
But look, the flip. Yeah. Caldwell's the exception to that.
Well played. Well done.
Listen. Here's my hot take. Right. If you want to put a fence up for an event around the Capitol, take it down when it's done. If you want to do it on a very temporary basis, like a day, maybe two, but make sure that crap comes down. We have a permanent installed fence around our state capitol now, which
I don't like it.
I want to take a hacksaw to it and just take as much time as I need to take it down myself. It's absolutely ridiculous. It's not just ugly. It flies in the face of everything that's traditional about Georgia politics. Georgia politics is accessible, and you can walk into the governor's office without an appointment. You can sign the book, get yourself some peanuts, get yourself Coca-Cola for free, and get yourself a Georgia flag. Walk across the hallway to the Secretary of State's office, get yourself a copy of the state constitution. It's a book rather than a pamphlet, and you can gain access to your legislators very easily. And I don't want to see that go away. And just because we've gone through some trying times doesn't mean that has to go away. It's not okay with me when we're putting up these fences. It's not okay that they stay there. They need to come down. When the heat of the moment has passed, the fences have to come down.
No, I completely agree with you. And the fence at the U.S. Capitol had just come down. I actually got to walk on the campus across, because when there wasn't a fence there, you could just walk right in front of the Capitol. And it's, at night, it's one of the most beautiful pieces of scenery in Washington, D.C. The only other one that rivals it is the Jefferson Memorial. And so I got to go over there one night and take some pictures. It was like a Sunday night. I had just gotten in town. I went to the office for a little bit and then walked over to the Capitol because I knew the fencing had just come down, and I still have those pictures there on my phone. It's just beautiful, but it makes me sad because if the COVID protocols are bad enough, particularly on the House side, the Senate side, there aren't really any COVID protocols at this point. At least there weren't 2 months ago when I did some meetings on the Senate side, but the House side, they're still very much in place. But this just adds insult to injury. You can't even get in the Capitol unless you have an official meeting at this point.
The Capitol area, Washington, D.C., the mall, all of those places have been the site of massive protests for decades and decades and decades in this country on every contentious issue that Americans have ever faced. And why now? I don't understand this idea that a group of people, no matter how ridiculous we may think their cause is, can't gather at the Capitol without a massive police presence.
Every day you walked into the Freedom Works office, there was a big mural-like photo that was taken by a Cherokee County photographer. I recognized it when I came to visit you as the work of one of my friends here in Cherokee County, of just this massive Tea Party protest, tens of thousands of people there. We can protest peacefully. And if the jump, the first step towards reacting to that is to put up a fence from now on, how far have we actually slid as a country?
No,
it makes me sad.
You're 100% right. And I don't know, it's all frustrating. It's all, I don't know, but I'm glad to see that she who should not be named actually cares about the plight of the prisoners in America. So if you work for her staff and you're
certain
actually
prisoners, that's the problem.
No, and that's it, right? It's only certain prisoners. It's the political prisoners.
They're not political prisoners.
They're not political prisoners.
They're not.
Yeah, they were not picked up and arrested and booked and charged with crimes related to what they said that day.
No, but if you actually care about the plight of prisoners, give me a call. Happy to talk to you about it and tell you about what prison conditions are like in federal prisons across the country. We can get Matthew Charles on the line. He can tell you all about it. But until then, just shut up.
I think that's a great way to end the podcast. Until then, just shut up.
Yeah, this has been an extra long podcast. Thanks for those of you on Twitch who stuck with us. Just remember, folks, every Wednesday, usually at 6, we kick off on Twitch. And then also facebook.com/the Peach Pundit, twitter.com/Peach Pundit, Scott's least favorite website, apparently, which I just learned today. And then peachpundit.com, of course, on the web. Thanks for watching us, Buzz, Scott. It's great to see you guys as always. Even though, Scott, you're the worst person who's ever lived. I take that back. I don't mean that.
At least you say my name. There's some people you won't even say their name on this podcast.
That's the Idi Amin.
Yeah. Anyway, peace out, folks.
Love you.
Have a good rest of your week. We're taking a week off next week. We'll be back week after next. Take care.
Bye.